Hi, and welcome to Digital Tech Lunch at FINN. We're very pleased to see so many of you here today at our final tech lunch before we hit the summer. Woo! But first, tech lunch, then summer. Today, you will meet Sjur Millidahl, a developer at FINN, who will discuss how to switching to functional programming. The AdView team, one of the team he's working in, of course, at FINN has been using Haskell as the primary language for the backend services in the last year. So Sjur will discuss the motivation of it, the experiences, but also obstacles faced. First, we'll have the presentation as always, and then we will round up with some Slido. So please share your comments, thoughts, questions at Slido, #TechLunch. I will send you a few reminders during the tech lunch, during the presentation too. But take it away now, Sjur, and we meet you at Slido.
Greetings from Eidsvoll. So this is where I spend my days now that the office is closed for at least for the few of us that has to take the train to work every day. And yeah, my name is Sjur Millidahl. I work as a programmer, primarily on the back end here in FINN. I have a team around me, some equally functionally minded folks. So we're called the AdView team. And yes, I'm also the dad of twins. So these are my boys, Nikolai and Vebjørn. I don't always put on an equally blue sweater on them because they can be a bit hard to tell apart. And I'm going to leave it as an open question, who is who? It's not always that easy to tell. So this talk is about how we're using Haskell in our team, and we have to go a little bit back in time to talk about how this all started. And as most developers, I started out learning the object-oriented way of programming in the university back in the days. I remember having a bit of a hard time grasping this abstraction, where the object is really the central piece that you think around doing programming. So the object has the state or the data, and the object has some methods or procedures and some functions, and the object has all the references to a vast number of other objects, possibly. And I remember being a bit puzzled about this, and I needed some time to understand the object-oriented approach. But it fell into place, and I've been programming for 10 years, I think, mainly Java. And then a friend of mine pointed me to a book. He said, check this book out. It's really nice. It's called Learn You a Haskell for Great Good. And the author is called Miran Lipovica. I'm not sure I can pronounce that correctly. It's a really cozy book with colorful figures and small short sentences, and Miran really does a good job of taking some new and strange concepts and making them available. So I started out with this book, and I usually say it took me about 2 years and about 3 attempts to absorb enough of it to sort of get over the steep learning curve and be able to write small programs and eventually some larger programs in Haskell. And of course, you being an enterprise developer, there's no point in being the only one who wants to do some functional programming. So I was able to, at the time, to navigate to a team that also did some functional programming, mainly in Scala. And a set of experienced developers and with responsibility for some of the many core services in Finn, but a few of them at least, and yeah. And then one day, an opportunity presented itself to write a small application that was not production critical, which was sort of a back office application for monitoring failure situations. So this is the application. It was called AdView Error Lookup, and what it did was take a GET request and spin through some recent Kafka messages in real time synchronously and present the results over web. And it was a kind of a simple application, and it was also not very well written, but it was written in Haskell, and that was fun. And then, of course, we needed to get this into production. How do we even run Haskell code when we need to? And luckily, Finn has a very skilled set of DevOps guys or infrastructure guys. They created this. You can call it a wrapper over Kubernetes, Finn as a service. It's so this is really what we needed. It makes it easy. It makes it really easy for us developers to simply have something that runs in Docker at a minimum amount of configuration, and you'll really have something that will run in production quite easily. So we took this AdView Error Lookup app and we made it run in Docker, and voila, we had some Haskell in production. And yeah. And then at a later stage, a large-ish project came along. We wanted to do or Finn wanted to do a facelift of the favorite feature that you might have seen on Finn. It's little hearts that allows us to sort of bookmark our favorite ads. And this was a legacy Java application handed to us, and we had quite a lot of issues with it. So in addition to making the front end more modern, we decided to do a rewrite of the back end as well. And then having had one sort of successful proof of concept of Haskell being able to do production stuff, we sort of got permission to use Haskell for this. So the hearts, that's the backend service for the hearts on Finn today is actually served by Haskell, and it works really well, luckily. Yeah. So speaking of Haskell, this is where we make a quick detour to explain what Haskell is. I'm guessing a few of you came to this talk a bit curious about this language because it's seemed as exotic to many developers. It's not quite a mainstream language, at least not yet, and it really is a different language. There are no objects in Haskell, so all this object-oriented thinking that we spend a lot of time learning has to be thrown out the window again, and we have to think about functions instead. And the language itself is also what's called purely functional, so sometimes also called a language without side effects. So what does this mean? It means that the central abstraction is the function, accepting arguments and passing a response or a result back out, and you can't do arbitrary effects without sort of letting the type system know that you're doing it. So you can't write a function that seems to be adding two numbers together and then talking to the database sort of in the middle of the function. That won't compile in Haskell. There's no way to do it, and this has to be declared. And the type system is really advanced. It's a language that leans heavily on computer science and some of the more abstract branches in mathematics to sort of give it a sound and safe architecture. And I have to show you a little Haskell as well, because it's really fun to see Haskell code when you haven't before. So this is, I think this is the smallest module we have in the backend service for the favorites. It's a small module that exposes a simple function called search. And you can see that we can import other stuff in a module. We can declare our own functions. We can be polite and also explicit about the type signature. So this search function is a function accepting a text, and then it accepts a function. It's the second argument, so that's why there's parentheses in there. And then it takes a list of A's, and it gives you back a list of A's. And yeah, I'm not gonna explain the syntax any further here. This is Haskell code, and I very much would recommend everyone to experiment a little with Haskell, because it's very fun to write. And some of my more subjective feelings or thoughts on Haskell is that it's a really beautiful language, and there's also an increased sense of having something work whenever you have it compiled. So when it compiles, it works, and the type system and the strong types also gives us more safety when doing refactoring, that more than we're used to, I would say. At least coming from Java and Scala, it's quite a confidence boost doing major refactorings. You simply change the parts you want, and then you have to fix all the red lines and make it compile again. And once it compiles again, there's a huge chance it actually still does what you want it to. And Haskell also brings some cool things that sort of a bit more novelties in the computer science department, like linear types that's being popularized by Rust, and also coming up are some dependent types, quite an advanced topic that's more familiar to the people doing proofs, using their computers to prove theorems, etc. And Haskell is also a little bit of a superpower when it comes to hiring developers. At least that's our experience. We did a very successful hiring to our team, advertising for a Haskell developer. But there are also some downsides to using Haskell. It's for years and years, the IDE support of Haskell has been sort of a laughing stock. It's been lagging 20 years behind what we expect from an IDE when it comes to code completion and code analysis and usage, find usages and refactor, renaming, all this stuff. So, but even that has the last year there's been some major improvements now, so it's possible to use VS Code with a Haskell language server plugin, and at least if you've been programming Haskell for a while, it's a major breakthrough. So I hope the community is getting there. The language itself can also seem really, or it is really dense. So it's possible to express Haskell really densely, and it can be very cryptic, or it's almost guaranteed to be cryptic. I usually say that Haskell is unreadable for everyone who does not know how to read Haskell. So it's really not a language you can just sort of squirt your eyes and be able to always tell what's going on. You have to learn this language, and but once you do, some doors open up, and the complexities of the domains and the complexity of different applications is often sort of shrinked. At least that's how I feel about it. And what's also true about Haskell is that the real world programming is the last thing you learn. It's sort of strange that printing hello world is not in chapter 1 in the Haskell book. It's more like chapter 10. So it's first you go through the hoops of learning about the functions and the types, and how to do all this, all sorts of pure calculations, and just the syntax that it's strange and new. And then finally we learn how to do some real world stuff, and then we also learn that we have to declare all this using the IO monad or similar. And another sort of downside or challenge using Haskell was how do we deploy this, or how do we build this, even because we use build servers and we're depending on continuous integration and continuous builds. And yeah, how do we make Travis build this stuff for us, and then how do we deploy it? But yeah, it's and also the build times can be quite long in Haskell, because Haskell is it has a large and complicated compiler, and it does a lot of things. So this affects the build times, and so we had to sort of make some concessions on or lower our expectations a bit on how fast Travis is able to build this stuff, and we ended up also learning Nix, which is sort of a tool for doing the managing dependencies and packaging Haskell applications. And this is sort of a talk or two in itself, so I can't go into that, but it's it had some challenges. So let's jump straight into the experiences of using Haskell. How did this go? Did we have any strange production bugs, for instance? Well, we had one, or we've had some production bugs. I'd say we've had fewer than I would expect. There's been one that I remember quite well. That's when you have your application, so we wrote these HTTP APIs, and they run really smooth locally, and then we would put them out in this using this FINN as a service over Kubernetes, and what we would see was that the whole application just froze. So that's not good. What's going on? How come this won't run in the cloud when it runs so smoothly locally? And then we found out that the default settings for the compiled binary was to use the runtime system to try to do an auto detection of the amount of cores available. And when you try to auto detect the amount of cores on these pods that we're using in FIAS, then you get the answer back that there are 256 cores available for you or something. And so the program got a little greedy and sort of stopped because it just spawned a bunch of threads, and it didn't have the actual CPU cores to back this up, and then everything just froze. So that took a little while to figure out. And we've also had some experiences of libraries that we were depending on having corner case bugs. Like there was a situation with the library we use for connection pooling up against the database to sort of leak connections that were in a bad state back into the pool. So what we call connection pool poisoning, and we had to work around that via, we sent a pull request and we fixed that upstream. And there's also been some other issues, some corner case. We're relying heavily on Kafka in Finn for sending and receiving messages asynchronously. And there's also been some corner cases with our Kafka libraries. But overall, it's really been stable. It's really been stable applications that have been using less CPU, less memory, and just been performing really, really well and as expected. So it's definitely a language that's mature enough for production use in an enterprise setting. So what about productivity in the team? This is of vital importance, of course, and in our team we're not all Haskell enthusiasts, so we're sort of it's sort of a range from I don't really care about Haskell that much to all the way full-blown evangelists that many of the Haskell developers eventually become. So we tried to sort of get everyone on board in the team in different ways, having weekly sessions, having sort of book recommendations, book clubs, signing up for online courses, and doing pair programming on the Haskell backend, and that last one was perhaps the most successful one. So that worked really well. We tried to find small-ish Haskell tasks and then pair some of the experienced developers with the less experienced ones, and so I'd say we've been able to make a small community in the team around Haskell, and everyone on the team has done some Haskell code and have pushed it, and everyone is coming along. So it's so Haskell has not been a blocker for us. It's in our Jira board, it's not the Haskell backend tasks that is the blocker normally. It's the normal things like waiting for decisions or waiting for external resources somehow and the like. And yes, it works. So we now have about 10 applications running in production that is using Haskell in the backend, and among the things it does is there's this redirect. If you go to FINN.no and then you can type a Finn code, because everything that's bought and sold on Finn has a Finn code, and you'll get a redirect back to the object page displaying that particular object, and that's so that redirect is served from Haskell, and we're also using it for the major project that we're in now in our team, which is sort of aggregating data and using this to display a company profile on the object page, as well as favorite and some other backend APIs. So we're using it primarily as HTTP APIs, using a library called Servant for that, and we're also using it for our Kafka applications, sending and receiving Kafka messages, which is at the heart of sort of domain-to-domain communication in Finn. So and we have a couple of libraries because we found out that we are repeating ourselves whenever we make a new application now, and we were able to extract a lot of this into a library, and Haskell definitely serves us well now. It works. And yeah, so this was a really brief introduction to our experiences with Haskell. And as a closing thought, I like to think that at the end of the day, you want to be tired in your head after programming not from holding all these complexities and a large, complicated domain and large code bases in your mind, but instead from sort of stretching it, learning new things, and a pure function never grows old. So that's nice to think about Haskell. Yes, thank you. I hope some of you have sent in some Slido questions.
Hi again. Yes, we have had a lot of Slido questions going on here while we're talking, Sjur. So thank you, Sjur, so long. And I will read out questions for Sjur since it would be easier for you to answer. So let's start from the beginning. How does a Haskell project scale as the code base grows larger? How is the ecosystem in terms of packages and tools?
Yeah, so this is a good question. Our code bases aren't that large, so I don't have. I can't really say that I have experience with the really large code bases in Haskell. I know that. Yeah, so our largest code base is, I don't know, it's like 100 small modules, and we've sort of split this up by feature. So we have feature modules with submodules, and so far that we sort of haven't met a wall there. It's scaling for us so far. It's still possible to quite easily find the part of the code you're interested in, I think. And the ecosystem for packages, libraries are really good. It's a package manager, or no, it's a tool called Stack that does the building for us, and it has a vast set of packages that it aggregates and tries to find the right version of, etc., and makes it available to us.
Thank you. Sorry for removing the first question. I have taken it back again. Let's go with the next one. Any thoughts between choosing Haskell or versus what do you say? F sharp? F sharp, yes. Yeah. I know Wix is using F sharp quite a bit.
Yes. So F sharp is it has. I haven't written any F sharp, but I know that it's a little bit sort of simpler than Haskell. I don't think it has the higher kinded types, which is one of the things that can be hard to learn in Haskell. And as far as I know, F sharp has really nice sort of C sharp support. So I think F sharp is a natural. I've heard that it's a natural choice when you're dealing with a Windows environment, or at least a C sharp kind of environment, and yeah, it might be a nice gateway to Haskell as well, because it's a little bit simpler, and I suspect that F sharp is a nice language for getting the sort of business logic right, and getting you on the right track. And then if you sort of want to take it to the next level, you can go for Haskell at a later point.
Yeah. Hope that answered. How did you reach the critical mass of Haskell competent developers so that you could go for it without creating a maintenance risk for your organization?
Yes, that's a good question. Maybe I did take a bit of a risk. Sort of looking back at it, then I would say it was a little bit of a risk. Yeah. So, but we started out small. It's if this application does not work at all, it's only one application, and it's not so big that it can't be rewritten. And then, but then we really had confidence in this, and we wanted to push forward. And then we were able to hire sort of a proper Haskell developer, and that lifted the sort of competence, Haskell competence in the team really quite a lot. And then we, in addition to the coursing and trying to get more people on board, we sort of created a small movement, and then it worked.
So small movements. It's a good trick. Yes. Yeah. Okay. How was the process of pitching this to management? What's that in your house knowledge base for Haskell at that time?
Yeah, so traditionally FINN has been a JVM sort of, or it's been a Java shop for quite a lot of years, and then but some years ago people pushed for Scala, and they sort of opened the door for that. Okay, you can use Scala, but then you need to be able to take responsibility for it running in production and etc. And then this policy has sort of loosened up more and more. It's now more or less up to the teams to choose a language that you feel that you are have the competence to sort of maintain. But it definitely was it was necessary to do a little pitch, and I remember being called into sort of this show and tell meeting with the technology leader group, and they did have some questions. Are you sure this is a good idea? What are the risks, and what will you do when this goes down at 10 o'clock in one evening because you forgot to close a database connection, and so I had to explain that no, that's a compilation error in Haskell. Oh, I didn't say that. That was a joke. It's quite possible to forget to close your database connections in Haskell as well. But yeah.
Of course, that's needful to have some kind of pitching in it. Yeah. Okay. What is a few pros and cons of functional programming language versus object-oriented programming? Can you answer that?
Yes. So this is a question I think about a lot, actually, and I feel that the sort of the complexity graph of a large object-oriented code base, it becomes a really large and complex graph, because every object can change the state of every other object, and it has a vast number of objects pointing out to it from each sort of node, and this means that you have to, even though you're a really skilled developer, you have to spend a lot of time getting to know each code base. Whereas I feel with the Haskell code base, then if you know Haskell, and that's a big if, of course, but if you do, then you won't have as hard time understanding what's going on where, because the parts are simpler. It's just functions accepting arguments, and then there are some fancy abstractions on top of this, but it's at the heart a simpler concepts. Even though modules can, of course, import and point to other modules, you don't have the same changing of a state that has not been passed to you explicitly.
Yeah. Good. Would you say that the learning curve is a challenge? What is the average time you got to go as a beginner to be productive? That's a good question, I think.
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's highly dependent on motivation, I think, primarily. And I would really and I would really say that every developer can also learn Haskell. It's not impossible to learn, but it's really a different language and it's difficult to learn. So you have to be motivated. And one of the things we learned is that you can't really make someone motivated. And you can encourage, and you can do pair programming and try every trick in the book. But it's at the end of the day, it comes down to you and to yourself. And for me, I think it took me 2 years and 3 attempts is what I usually say. But that was on and off, and I had small kids at home, and I read Haskell at night, and it's entirely possible for a developer to be productive in 6 months. That's some of the people in our team have picked it up really fast because they already did some Scala, and they're already thinking around functions. And so I'm afraid I don't have an average time, and some of the team members would still need some pairing and advice when doing at least a large Haskell task. So it can take more than 2 years as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's a pretty long time, but I mean, of course, when you're doing it in a team, it's a pretty good challenge. I think you can help each other out. And let's see here. How can I convince my colleagues to try out functional programming?
Okay, Lars, this is what you do. No, so I like to have a small notebook where I take small notes every time an object-oriented code base runs into a problem, big or large, and then I just at the end of the day say, "Oh, this wouldn't be a problem in Haskell. This would never have hit runtime." Now I think it's one of these things when after getting into Haskell, you really strongly feel that this is the right way to do programming, or this is a better way to do programming. And then you get sort of the urge to impose this. This is how we should do it, everyone. But I small doses. I think do some talks, lend out some books, and
Exactly, inspiring them.
That's
Good luck, Lars, I would say. Any tips for someone who is about to learn functional programming? I think you've been touching on it, but
for me it was books, and especially this Learn You Haskell for Great Good. It has done a good job of taking something that is new and possibly a little scary and dumbing it down and presenting it in small chunks. So reading that book and also trying out some code in your in a REPL is a nice approach. So that's a good way to get into it, and then you'll go to the conferences and you'll meet the like-minded people, and you're hooked.
Are there any domains problems that suits FP Haskell well, also where you should not use it, or is Haskell for general purpose backend?
Yeah, that's a nice question. Haskell is really good at parsing. Okay, so whenever you have some data with a small structure in it and you want to be able to translate this into your domain somehow, then Haskell is a superb choice. It's also really good at making HTTP APIs. I at least that's my feeling, because the endpoints are actually typed, and you can have some safety that the URLs you are exposing are actually feeding you the features that's expected. And where you should not use it. So it's I don't think so, or at least we haven't stumbled upon any backend case that we feel is not suitable for Haskell. In our team, it's pretty general purpose, and library support is quite good. Yeah.
Okay. Have you looked at function programming for the front end?
Yes. So there's Elm, and there's an Elm community in Finn as well, and Elm is getting quite a traction in Norway. So that's also like a sort of a younger brother to Haskell, a little bit stripped of the most advanced features, but at the other hand, easier to get to know and get productive in. We don't use Elm in our team, or we have a little bit in PureScript, which is sort of the hardcore Haskell alternative for the front end, but but the Haskell developers are sort of backend heavy, so it's so we haven't touched upon that much. And as for Closure scripts, I don't know much about it. I know it's getting more Lisp-like, and I know I suspect it's not as strongly typed as Haskell is, and that's sort of one of the main selling points in my world. So so even though we have a lot of JVM applications, we haven't dived into Closure, but I know many people are very happy about it, so there must be something nice there. F# Fable, no, I haven't used or even heard of Fable, I think.
Yeah. How many people are using Haskell every day in developing?
Okay, so every day, it's almost the same number, because it is our team that uses Haskell, and even though there's one other team that has one application, and there's a couple of other skilled Haskell developers in other teams, or at least two. There are some really good Haskell developers in other teams as well, but they don't have the opportunity to. They haven't got their team on board, so so they're not writing Haskell at all, except for hack days and these sort of non-day-to-day events. So every day and every week, that's about that's 5 or 6 people. It's the backender in the AdView team.
Yeah, that's the team. Any thoughts on Scala for learning FP, and whether allowing FP Java code together with FP would make it more difficult and not easier?
Yes, I am worried about this as well. So I share your concern a little bit when it comes to Scala C as the gateway for FP, because as you say, there are, if not colliding concepts, there are two major concepts at play at once. So so I would actually suggest moving directly to Haskell, and then sort of as a bonus, you'll be very fast, very comfortable in sort of the hardcore functional programming Scala libraries as well, because these are heavily inspired by Haskell.
Yeah. Here comes something about the books that you have mentioned. What books have you read so far for your study groups?
Oh yeah, so there's this book called Haskell from First Principles. It's a big book. I think it's 1,200 pages, and it really aims to teach you all the major new concepts in Haskell once you're through it. But at the same time, it's quite a sort of a brick of a book, and you have to be motivated. But it's really a sound resource, and I'm not sure we can call it a study group, but at least we at least have at least some developers in Finn was reading that and meeting up, I think. But we also did some Coursera. There was this Haskell course in Coursera, which we all took, and also some other online course that I don't remember. And apart from that, we just bought in some books that people can borrow, Learn Your Haskell, and another one called Real World Haskell, which, even though it's getting a little bit outdated because it's the libraries have moved on a little bit since it was published, it's still a good book for the enterprise stuff that many Haskell books don't teach you. And yeah, that's the
that's good tips. Hope you got that, Haven. Otherwise, you need to contact us again. Can you say something about how scopes are handled in Haskell? Are there scopes?
Scopes. Well, I suspect or perhaps you're talking about namespacing and sort of what can I do with the information that I'm receiving. And well, at the simplest part, it's sort of divided into modules, and each modules can choose to expose some types, and it can choose to expose some functions, and that is the only stuff that you are able to import and hence see, and that's all that is in scope. And when it comes to writing a function or writing a feature, that would almost always boil down to writing a function, and in a function you can't really manipulate anything that isn't passed to you, either explicitly or through some tricks like a reader and stuff. Or and there are some challenges with especially with something called the record syntax, in which every field is turned into an accessor function, and the namespace could be a bit polluted. So there's some words around it, but otherwise that's my summary of scopes, even though I'm not sure I fully understand the question.
Just mentioned that we see that a few people have ask questions in the comments. We will go through them afterwards. We will start. Some of you have actually added them into Slido. Please do. It'd be easier for us to read everything through Slido. But if you haven't, we'll go through them at the end. Are you using Nix with Haskell? How do you say the last one?
I don't know. The last one is hard. Nix packages, I usually say. Yes, we do. So Stack is the build tool we use, and Stack has a Nix integration. So whenever we build a Haskell repository, we are actually invoking a Nix shell in which where the building happens, and then that allows us to pull in these native C libraries that we need, for instance, for talking to Kafka and for interacting with Postgres databases. So we use Nix, and we also wrote this sort of I don't know what we can call it. It's sort of a build system for our Haskell applications on Travis. We call it Travis Nix, and it does the building for us and it uses the Nix Docker tools to create a Docker image that ends up in production.
Yeah. Cool. What's the future? All new backends written in Haskell.
Yes, and that sounds like a bright future. It's I think that Haskell will continue to grow, just because it's based on the ideas it's based on are so sound that they have to sort of grow over time. I can't envision anything else, but I don't think every backend is written in Haskell overnight. This is due to the steep learning curve, and a lot of people have enough on their plate with responsibilities and programming day to day, so they can't simply just pick up a new language and switch to it. So, but I hope it'll grow.
Yeah, we hope so. Is there any restriction on which DB, maybe you don't say that, you can use with Haskell?
Yeah, there probably is. So we've used Postgres, and I guess that's the most mainstream of them. So we sort of have multiple libraries to choose from, but and I'm pretty sure that sort of the major databases you'll be able to find libraries, but I doubt that you'll have every. Yeah, I can imagine you'll run into a lack of libraries if you are using one of the off-shelf databases. Yeah. I'm not sure though.
No. How did you convince the IT development department to switch from what was the company's standard practice regarding technology to start using Haskell?
Yeah, so luckily you don't need an upfront application anymore. At least I didn't send one, so it's better to ask for forgiveness. No, it's I was lucky enough that it was sort of a team decision. So you only have to have some enthusiasm in your team, and this was already a quite functional programming oriented team. So it's yeah. So that gave us some freedom.
So your tip is get your team with you.
So, but of course, for if you're sort of if you're in a place, if you're a consultant in the public sector, this I can imagine this is harder to get permission for. But if I had to give an answer, I would say that if you do some talks, then maybe they'll listen to you.
Of course. So get your team with you and do some talking, make presentations. Yeah. Yeah. Are you afraid of the possibility that the mainstream languages will get enough functional features that Haskell will become less and less useful?
Oh, I'm not overly worried about Java. So to put it that way, it's they would not only have to get a lot of features, they would also have to shred some a whole bunch of features, and so that sounds really unrealistic. And but Haskell has always been inspiring other languages because even Java. Excuse me, even Java has lambdas now, right? So and Scala 3 is really picked up on the type classes and other Haskell features, but I don't think personally, I don't think the Haskell competitor will be one of the mainstream languages. I don't see that happening, but I could be wrong. In any case, it's a good thing that Haskell is sort of feeding out features to other languages, because that's only a proof that it's got some really great ideas in the language.
Yeah. Good. Since you are working with some apps with Haskell in your team, is Haskell a requirement for new devs, or do you have a nice onboarding process?
No, so we are both backend and front-end developers. We've tried to be a little full stack, but at least not all of us are. And so we've for our team, we've explicitly searched for a Haskell developer before, and then we hired a really skilled Haskell developer, and we recently acquired a front-end guy and front-end person, and there was no Haskell requirement there. So yeah, we try to do onboarding. It depends a little bit if the team is allowed to grow sort of at one point, and we have the opportunity to search for a backend developer, then I think Haskell will be a plus. But it's a person already knowing Haskell would be a plus, but it should also be possible to onboard a motivated backend developer that doesn't know Haskell.
No, of course. Usually for all procedures that we do onboarding. We don't really, even though we can wish that people have certain requirements, we don't have a strict requirement for you need to have any of the languages. No. You cannot dependent on one or two developers in case one or two leaves or is hit by the bus while crossing the street. Oh, that was awful. Yeah, I hear you. I hear your thoughts here.
Yeah, yes, I agree with this. So one or two are not enough, and I would say that we are luckily we're more than 2 Haskellers in our team at the moment, and there are more Haskell competence spread around FINN in other teams not working with Haskell. So I feel that for FINN we're a sort of above critical Haskell developer mass, not to worry about the bus factor.
Yeah. Fingers crossed that will not happen. List the tools you ended up with for enterprise applications. IDE, DB, libraries, build tools. Yeah, you can read it.
Yeah, so it's mainly so it's a Postgres database, and we need to talk to Postgres and Kafka. So we use a library called Haskell for the Postgres stuff, and a Haskell works library called HW Kafka client and HW Avro something for the Avro part of Kafka, and we use Servant as the HTTP API library. Yeah, JSON, that's the big one called ISON. So yeah, and packaging deployment. Yeah, so we use Nix for this, and but Stack's the build tool. So there are 2 systems in the Haskell world. It's Cabal and Stack, and we're on Team Stack.
Yep. Okay, one more question. We have 2 more at the comments too in YouTube. So let's take this one first. Have other teams management been impressed with how fast your Haskell team can produce features, or what the low number of bugs that I assume you have, etc.?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't. Even though I feel like we have really few bugs, I think it's a high bar to impress the other teams at FINN. So it's so they've not been running down our doors, complimenting us. But I do think we sort of have a little bit of respect from the other teams. I hope so, at least. Yeah.
Maybe it works just as so fine, so people don't even think about it.
Yeah, it's could be.
But they should compliment you. Okay, let me just finish off this slider here, and I can share these questions here. I think we haven't gone through this one.
Yeah, I think we...
Did we do that?
One. Yeah, at least how I interpreted the question.
Yeah.
Is it
Cool.
possible to work with enterprise applications? Oh no, yeah, no, sorry. I need to add something to that. I think like in IntelliJ, you can interact with your database. For instance, you sort of just add your connection string in there, and then it'll sort of help your the part of your code that's dealing with the database. And the short answer is no, you won't get that, I'm afraid. So the Haskell IDE is not that enterprisey and far ahead yet.
Yeah. I think that has to be the last one today because we're past 12 already. Time is up. Sjur, big thank you to you. You have answering questions for more than 30 minutes. Wow, compliments. I hope all of you have been listening. I've actually got a big understanding in how to, first of all, start up with Haskell in your group and also developing it. Sjur, thank you.
Thank you.
And for everyone else, enjoy a nice summer, and we will be back after the summer breaks again with new tech launches. Okay. Thanks.
Ja, da var det Hustad. Oi.
Ja, promp jo helt naturlig. Og noen det jo litt lukt på, som jeg kanskje kjenner litt nøtt nå. Ja.
FINN.no